Today we're with Sean at Gapsto, and he is our go-to website guy, especially for anything e-commerce. He's helped a number of our clients and is just like an all-around awesome guy. So just a little bit about Sean and why we chose to have him on this video. He's a serial entrepreneur and proud Cleveland, Ohio resident. He's built several websites for his own business, and then he realized that he enjoyed the work and started building websites for other businesses as well. So that grew into the Cleveland Marketing Group. And after several years, a friend invited Sean to explore the world of Shopify, which is kind of like how we met him, specifically because we had a client who needed a Shopify website. And that started his journey, and he's never looked back. So soon after his Shopify focused business agency was born, called Gapsto, after the bridge in New York City, where he proposed to his wife. Sean loves to help entrepreneurs to build e-commerce strategies that need to grow and scale their business. So we're so excited to have you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean.
I'm super happy to be here. I have to say too, it's a little bit daunting to sit and write this paragraph out about yourself so that you guys can read it. But it's also super weird to have it read about you as you just sit here like, that's me.
See, you're impressive, Sean. It's all good.
Well, thank you. I tried very hard. If you could tell my wife that later, that'd be great too.
So today we wanted to dive into the 5 common mistakes that people make whenever they are approaching a website project. So Sean, being the expert, we're going to let you share each of the 5, and we'll kind of just chat about them and why those are common concerns.
Cool. So as I compiled this list, I kept 2 things in mind. First off, from your perspective, branding super, super important. So I kind of weighed that in. And also the brands that you and I work on together tend to be CPG. So we weighed that in also. The first one I decided to talk about was having too little information on your website. Oftentimes as brand owners, we know our brand. We know our why. We know what's in our brand. And what's in our products and things like that. And we tend to not translate that properly to our website, which means that if I'm a prospective customer, I don't have the opportunity to learn that because it's not on the site.
So do you when you have too little information, right? What kind of information do you think should be on there on a website?
So as we approach the build or the design of a site, we always consider user journeys. And there's a lot of agencies out there that get super heavy into it. We don't do complete decks or anything like that. However, it's a big piece of how we design everything that we design. With that in mind, you have to consider that different people at different stages in the buying process and with different amounts of knowledge about your brand or your products or whatever are coming to your site, which means that, for instance, if I come to your site and you're selling a food product, I'm going to look at it personally and go, yep, that looks good. I want to eat it, and I'll probably buy it. If my wife does, she's going to want to know where it's sourced from, what it's made out of, what sets it apart from its competitors and all that stuff. And as a brand, you should make sure to put both of those user journeys into action. So if I do want to just hit the site and check out, I should be able to do that. However, if I need to dig in and learn all about your product, I should be able to do that at the same time.
Oh, go ahead.
No, it's okay. You look like you had something to say.
I think there's a lot here where I think people do misunderstand that clients. It's not everyone, but maybe 10% of people want to know everything there is about the product. And I think that there's this drive now to make things as quick and as easy as possible. So I think that we're probably missing some details in between.
Yeah. I always feel like that there's this kind of push-pull between how much information is too much and then how much is too little. We live in a world where it's you get a max 140 characters for anything, right? So people have these quick,
and for YouTube video, it's 5 seconds or less.
Yeah, this very quick, kind of.
And our attention span is shorter. Yeah, our attention span is shorter than it's ever been before.
Yeah.
So again, going back to user journeys, my attention span is super fast. In order to get my attention, it needs to be bright and shiny and loud and whatever else. But again, comparing my wife, just because she's so different than I am, she prefers to dig in. She prefers to read the paragraphs. She prefers to look at all the icons and all that stuff. For me, the second my gut says, yeah, let's do it, I'm in.
Yeah.
She likes to reassure herself. So even to that point, and this didn't make my list, but even things like convincing other people that you are valid, right? So whether it's because other people are giving you their money or because you're going to manage all of their information in a secure way, or you're not going to blow them up with marketing emails afterwards or whatever.
Oh yeah.
There's a way to convey that to people, even if it's subconsciously, without inundating them with too much information, which actually was my second point. Having too much information on your site is also a negative thing.
So how do you walk people through, like, say they come to you and they want to start a website project? Like, how do you walk them through, like, if they have too much, too little, like, how do you assess that?
It depends, and I think this probably could be the answer for most of the questions that you have. It depends very much on the brand and the site and everything else.
Oh, sure.
But really, it goes back to those user journeys. If you can clearly identify, these are the 5 people that are here. So for instance, with CPG brands, it's consumers, it's people who have tried our product but never bought our product, it's wholesalers, we do wholesalers, distributors, things like that. And each of those are going to have a very different user journey. And with that, they're going to need different amounts of information. And going back to that push-pull between too much and too little, one of the ways that we like to suggest to accomplish that is if you have like an icon on your site, and maybe it's an icon of a stalk of wheat, and you can hover over it and it'll say, hey, this is gluten-free, and we do gluten-free for this reason, and we manufactured it at this particular place for this, whatever the case is, so that it's a clean icon. But I know when I hover over, I can see that more information that I want to gather for my own buying process. And first glance, nice and clean, very easy to navigate. But as I want to dig into it, it's available for me to do so.
Oh, so like hovering or like drop down menus. Yeah, over states is like a really good.
Yep.
Oh,
yeah. So that way it's still relatively compact for mobile, but you can still give the information if people want to dig.
That's actually a good point too, is oftentimes we try to, not we, people in general try to design it so that the same thing looks good on desktop as it does mobile. And sometimes that's a point of friction with clients, as we say, okay, here's what it will look like on desktop, and here's the condensed version, or the version where we can hide more, or make an accordion or whatever on mobile, so that it's more usable there. And sometimes it's not as pretty, but it's overly functional on mobile. Maybe not overly, that has a negative connotation, but more functional on desktop, or on mobile. But again, if a great majority of your users are on mobile, we need to make sure that user journey is as seamless as possible, so that they can do what they need to do with the device that they're doing it on.
Do you see, like, I hear like that pretty much like the numbers are well over half are mobile, like, users on any given website. I don't know, that's maybe a broad statistic, but like, I'm curious, like, do you feel that like mobile should be more emphasized in any kind of web journey?
So what I will say is, as we design mobile first on most sites. Now, some of our more antiquated industries that we work with, where the users are more desktop driven, then we'll design desktop first. However, we all carry around our phone. That's the reason that SMS marketing works so well, because you might open an email, but nobody ever gets a text and doesn't open it to see what it's about. So we have our phones. It's so easy, especially with things like SMS marketing, to get people to our mobile site now, that if you're ignoring your mobile site, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's so funny, when we were even building like our website, we were first starting with like the desktop, and then we're like halfway through, we're like, oh shit, we gotta like get on that mobile version too. Like, that was like a want moment.
Yeah, well, and I feel you, because we're redesigning our site now, and it's hard for an agency to be able to, in my opinion at least, to convey, here's all the things we do and look how cool they look on a screen that's this big.
Yeah.
On a desktop, you have more of a palette to work with, and you can have things that are moving, for instance, because on mobile, you're going to get rid of all the GIFs and the MP4s and all that stuff for optimization.
Yeah.
But it's a reality. Mobile's first is where we live right now.
No, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Just a follow-up question there. Do you see like that this varies a little bit by industry? Like I feel like food would be something where a lot of people use mobile, but maybe something like buying a industrial printer would be much more desktop usage or something
Yeah,
like
100%. 100%. Yeah. And you know what's funny, actually, with CPG brands, with food, it's hard because every brand we talk to says, oh, I want my website to look like Poppy, or I want my
Oh.
website to look like X. And it's because they have all these really cool movement and stuff like that on their site. And then you go to their mobile site and it's super boring. And again, you kind of have to be. It's kind of a reality, because if you're on a slow site on mobile, you're moving on. We talked before about how we have a very, very short attention span. I feel like, I don't know the statistics on it, but I feel like it's even less on a mobile device than it is a desktop. So those same sites tend to be super boring, and because we design mobile first,
Yeah.
There's always an uphill battle of, look, we can do that, but their site's kind of boring when you look at it on mobile. What if we did this? And it's always interesting. But
I feel the challenge. I do.
Yeah, for
We've
sure.
been battling with it in our own new site.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we learned a few programming things along the way.
I know. Yeah. A little bit of code. Yeah. So, well, actually it's a good segue into your next point that, I think you were going to mention is like a lot of people, especially when they come to us for branding, they look at other brands and they say, oh, I want to be the next like Apple or Nike, aspirational, right? Like,
yeah. No, that's actually, it's funny that you said Apple. We worked with a headstones company. They make headstones for graves. And they said, we really like the Apple site. We want it to be like the Apple site.
Okay.
And this was pretty much my reaction, because what do you do with that?
Like,
it's it was super, it was kind of an odd project, to be honest with you. So we ended up, we went all in on the Apple thing. We made it super sleek and modern, and which is kind of a weird thing for headstones. The headstones industry is one of those antiquated ones that I mentioned before. And then through the course of working with the client, we ended up at a really basic, kind of boring site, because they decided that they wanted to stick closer to the industry that they were in, so as not to scare people away when they're shopping all these other brands that are antiquated and their website's not fantastic, and then they come to theirs and it operates completely differently. And even if it is better UX and everything else, they said it's too different now. So we ended up, we built the nice site and then had to go back on it. But to your point, like I said, especially CPG brands, they're so funny. There's like three brands that we hear all the time. Poppy is one of them. Every time we work with a beverage brand, oh, I want to look like Poppy, because on Poppy's site, drinkpoppy.com, theirs is really bright, and it's got these cool like fruit shapes, and like it's very modern, very clean, good design. The issue is that's not their brand. And so sometimes they have a brand that is kind of muted, especially compared to Poppy, which is like real bright fluorescent colors, and they don't understand why it doesn't translate. So we could do the exact same things with their brand, but because their colors are different or whatever else, it's not the same personality. So that was, as I thought about this list, that was my number 3, was don't try so hard to be somebody else. As we are working with somebody through their strategic workshop to figure out what their mock-up needs to look like, we will always ask for inspiration sites. But we don't just say, tell us what site you like. We say, make sure to be specific. I like the header of this site. I like the way that the slideshow moves in this direction on this site, so that we can say, oh, they like the functionality here. Or they like, even if it is, we like the colors, we like the aesthetics, we can work with that. But I want to be like Poppy. That's not super helpful to yourself as the brand owner. It's not helpful, because you're not Poppy. You are your own brand.
Yeah. So is that like, I mean, because that's like something very common that we have is like people want to compare themselves, but when you really dive into it, right? Like they're
So, I mean, there's this desire to imitate something successful or to be associated with something successful. And sort of, yeah, someone else did maybe some of the heavy lifting, but there's this real danger. You can't beat them at their own game, probably. You know, if you have a competitor, you're trying to imitate them, but also, you know, every brand has its own voice. And what we do is we try to find that voice that's unique and leverage it, you know, with branding, with marketing, with the logo.
yeah.
But it's challenging because some people do want to kind of fit the genre. Like if it's coffee shop, there's certain coffee looks, you know, for coffee shops or whatever. So there's always this kind of desire to not stray too far to confuse your clients or your prospect clients.
I almost see it as like it could be a missed opportunity to just think differently within your own industry. Like the reason that Poppy is so popular, right, is just because that's so different of what was the beverage brand was like before, you know, like all the other competitors were doing something very similar to each other. And then someone came in and did something totally different. You know, that's why people look to that and they're like, oh, it's really different. And it's so funny. Like, I feel like sometimes people want it, but they don't. Like your Tombstone client, they're like, oh crap.
Right. I did actually want that.
Yeah.
We've seen that though. You know, like, oh, I'm a little too scared of like
it's like,
oh, change.
Yeah, it's almost like too far, right? So how do you walk people back from that when they really want to be like another brand and then they're like, oh man, like too much.
Right. Well, and I think that part of that comes with from a client standpoint, trusting the people that you're working with. So you know, if you're working with Katie and Jason at Fizz, for instance, and they say, no, this is what we'd recommend, you're paying them, you know, however much money you're paying them because you trust them and their process and what you're good at, right? The same is true with your website and stuff. What I end up saying to all of my clients is, I will build whatever you tell me to build. However, I would recommend you don't build that for these reasons. And the goal is to work with clients and from a client perspective, work with agencies that you trust enough that when they say, hey, maybe you should consider not doing that, you at least listen to them and hear them out. And then, you know, if you feel strongly because it is your brand, go. Like, what do they know? Let them, you know, but at the same time, they do know. They're good at what they do. They work on it every single day. Like, you got to trust the people you work with.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right, let's get into the last mistake. What's the last mistake, like big mistake that people make on their website?
So again, this is going to change for every single brand. However, the one that I thought of is from an e-commerce standpoint is spreading yourself too thin as to where you're selling. You know, if you, for instance, if you're a CPG brand, your primary is probably retail. If it's not retail, good for you, but it's probably retail. With that comes all sorts of overhead and lower margins and everything else. So then you say, oh, well, I want to do e-commerce, and the e-commerce is fantastic. I'm all about it. Hit me up if you want to talk about it. However, with that comes its own, and even just the fact that you have to have somebody that constantly manages the site and curates it and make sure that the products are up to, up to snuff, and that they're listed correctly, and that the inventory is correct, and that the pricing is all that stuff, right? It takes a lot. So then you say, oh, okay, well, there's a lot of people that shop on Amazon. I want to be on Amazon too. Again, it's a perfectly valid strategy, but it takes time and it takes money, and you have to advertise on Amazon. You can't just put it out there and hope that people find it. And what ends up happening is, because you say, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, you end up with 3 or 4 or 5 different channels that you're trying to sell through, and you're not doing super well at any of them because you're spread too thin.
This is a business decision as well as a marketing decision or web decision.
Absolutely.
Question?
Yeah. Do you feel like that there, I mean, obviously it kind of depends on the client, but do you feel like that there's kind of like a magic number, like a CPG brand, like straight out of the gate, like how many channels should they focus on? And it's probably different, like depending on the product, but I'd imagine like 1 or 2, right?
I would say 1. And
one.
Oftentimes that cuts me out. But the fact is, you have more money to spend on your e-commerce strategy when you're doing well in retail.
Mm.
And as a CPG brand specifically, you almost certainly should be retail first. Only because the logistical piece of e-commerce for a CPG brand tends to be tough. You know, if it's frozen, it's hard to ship frozen products quickly.
Yeah.
Or if it's like even like bags of popcorn are super light, but they take up a lot of space. And so then all of a sudden you have to pay a certain amount of money for shipping a box. And then you say, oh, okay, well, I can make it up with subscription plans. But who likely is going to have a subscription of popcorn or of soda, or you know, it doesn't happen.
Or soup even, yeah.
Right. So soup actually is a funny one. Like there's I think it's Campbell's. You can go on and you can get a subscription of cans of soup.
Didn't know that.
But who does that? It's like, well, and
That's an odd
Heinz.
one.
Heinz is the same thing. You can get a subscription of ketchup, or there are other sauces that they sell. And it's like, I love subscriptions in general in e-commerce, building monthly recurring revenue so it's predictable income, super fantastic plan. You should absolutely do it if it makes sense. Unfortunately, in CPG specifically, it tends to not make sense. So it's my point in to actually answer your question, it should probably be one. And once you got retail down, retail is one of those things that's ever evolving and you'll never be done with it. But once you feel like, okay, we're getting our legs under us. If we were to get a new order, we know what to do with it. Maybe, you know, we have our tech set up for it or whatever, then move on to your e-com. And your e-com should be either Amazon, recognizing that with that comes, first off, a 15% haircut right off the top because Amazon takes its cut when you sell stuff. But then also you can't just put it on there and hope that people find it. So then you have to advertise and build out your store and all that stuff. Or Shopify, or, you know, wherever you build, but it should be Shopify because it's the best. Just saying.
Yeah.
Not paid ad.
Right. But with Shopify, you also have to understand you have to get people to the site. You could spend $100,000 on this beautiful site and set it out there, and nobody's going to come to it because they don't know about it. So then you have to do things like your Facebook and Instagram ads, or your Google ads, or your affiliate marketing, or your email marketing, or whatever. But even that takes time and money. So so to your point, 1 or 2 is the magic number. Probably retail first if you're CPG, and then secondarily 1 e-com. And then once that gets rolling, then you can, you know, and probably more specifically, once you have somebody else to manage it for you, whether it's an agency or an in-house hire, then start to expand. And even then do it slowly, because it's so easy to have the ground slide out from under you.
That's fair.
Yeah. Like, when do you usually recommend, like, so say, you know, a company's been in business for a few years, they have a couple stores, you know, or they sell in their own shop or something like that. Like, when do you think it's good for them to consider an e-commerce model if they're a CPG brand?
That's a good question.
We're talking in hypotheticals here.
Right.
It needs more hypothetical parameters.
Yeah, I think it's more hypothetical parameters.
I think I have to go back to it depends on the company. You know, even because your margins are different on every single product. And even if it's one company that sells multiple products, your margins are different per product. You know, so it basically it needs to be a business decision. And that's where I'll leave that. So I there's not a magic number. It very much depends on your brand and your margins and everything else, but it should be a numbers decision. You should look at it and say, we have the margin, we have the potential profit to go into this. And if I lose X amount of thousands of dollars, because we're realistic as business owners, just kidding, that doesn't ever actually happen. But if I have, you know, X amount of thousands of dollars that I happen to lose them because the strategy doesn't work out, that would be okay. We could sustain it and move forward. And I think that's the point in any business decision, that it makes sense to move forward, because risk is absolutely important in business. However, to risk it and potentially lose your business because of it it's not worth the risk. In my opinion. There's lots of people that would disagree with me on that, but
no, I'm super risk adverse. Like, I'm always like, I don't know.
We're a little bit risk adverse.
Yeah. Like, I always like looking at numbers before I invest in anything, or like, you know, anything for our business. Cause it's like, you just don't want to like press yourself too thin and then you're like
Mm.
stressed out. It's no good.
Yeah.
So, well, cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions, Ben?
Oh, we could ramble, but
We could ramble.
but no, I
I
think
mean,
that-
we go back for years at this point, right? We literally could
Yeah.
probably just sit here and talk for a while, but
Yeah, I know.
Alright, but we want to make sure people actually.
Yeah, I want to make
Yeah.
that's
we want to
true.
make sure we're like high impact here. So
Right. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. I apologize
Yeah.
for not being super entertaining, but you know,
no,
Oh,
oh my
they'll
gosh,
do
you're
better.
so- no, you're so it's all good. So I guess is there any kind of like parting thoughts or like ideas, you know, to help people if they are considering you know, redoing their website or getting into e-commerce, like any other kind of tips or tricks you would recommend they keep in mind?
So the one thing I will say is I talk to a lot of CPG brands, and generally speaking, and I don't want to put everybody into a bubble too generically, but generally speaking, because ecom is not your number one strategy for selling things, the budget generally is not there to build the crazy expensive site. So then the default is, well, I'll either do it myself or I'll hire a freelancer. And of those two options, do it myself is always the better option.
Oh,
And I'll explain why. So first
Yeah.
off, if you go on to like a Fiverr or an Upwork or anything like that, it's very easy to find somebody that says, I do Shopify. That same person will also build you a PowerPoint, and they'll build a Magento site, and they'll do your branding for you, and they'll run your ads. And the fact is, to find somebody that is very, very good at what they do and specializes in it is going to come with a cost. So then your options are go cheap on your freelancer and be disappointed with communication or work product or whatever, or do it yourself, understand that it's going to take longer because you have to do it yourself and you have a billion other things on your plate and whatever else, but you also curate everything that's on that site. You have final approval because you're the one that's doing it, and you end up saving money. So then my ultimate advice here would be, don't cheap out on your Shopify theme. Spend the $400 or $500 on it because it makes a difference, and then choose wisely as to who's working on it. Obviously, from an agency standpoint, I'm going to tell you to go hire an agency. Obviously, I want you to call Gapstone. We'll work together. We'll do beautiful things. However, if that's not an option, just be very careful about who you do hire, because it's so much easier to hire the wrong person than it is the right one.
So kind of like, segue. Sorry, one last little thing. What are good things to look for in a web agency? Like, what are some like things that I guess
are there any red flags or any like things that are like hidden gems?
Yeah.
So the one thing I would say is anybody that says that they can do it all, run away. Nobody's good at everything. Period. Like, what drives me nuts personally is those agencies that say, oh, we do Shopify and we do WordPress and we do BigCommerce and we do Magento and we do Salesforce. You can't possibly do them all. Not well.
Yeah,
Shopify
not well.
has
That's the
its
biggie.
own right. Shopify has its own language. It has its own nuances. It has its own like changing API. It has like all these things that takes a lot to stay up on. We are constantly working to make sure that we know the best and most accurate information about Shopify. If I were to do that for 5 or 6 different platforms, there's no way I'm going to know it all, period. So then what ends up happening is you end up with things like Shopify is built to be super dynamic and fluid the way that you code it, so that if you change one thing here, it changes over here, right? And what happens is, because you say, oh, I can do it all, you do the kind of coding that they all take, which then means that if I do something in Shopify here, it might break it over here because it's not built in their language, or it's not built dynamically or whatever. And it's those little things that at the beginning seem fine because, oh, my site's there and it's beautiful. And then you log in to change something and you're like, where do I even go to change this? Or when you do, it's like, oh, this random piece of my site stopped working, you know. And it's so beware of jack of all trades for sure. And then people that are afraid to say, I don't know. That's one of those things that as we bring on a new project manager, I stress, like, it's okay not to know, because the reason that we are good at what we do is because we generally do know, And if we don't, we know where to look or who to ask for that information. And, you know, as a project manager, especially new to a team, you don't want to be the person that says, I don't know the answer to that. You know, for our clients, we love being that expert resource. But at the same time, for me personally, it's so much more impactful when somebody says, I don't know that answer. I'll get back to you. Because I'd much rather somebody be transparent than blow smoke.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
No, for sure.
Well, there's certainly a fear of losing trust with a client or just to save face. And there's a lot of parallel here with what we do. Certainly, a lot of studios or agencies do branding and food packaging.
Oh, yeah. If
well-
I had a dime for every time I heard someone say, oh, we do like web design and brand design, I'm like,
Yep.
really? Mhm.
I mean, so to get someone who does everything, you're talking like Pentagram or Leo Burnett or someone huge who's going to
Yeah.
charge you $100,000
Right.
or more, maybe much more.
Yeah.
So if you don't have that kind of budget, someone's probably just going to do a good enough job, or
Hmm.
you know, something like that could happen.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
For sure.
We always find a specialist for what we need, you know, and often at times that's you for e-commerce.
mhm.
And we have other people for different types of web design.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just, you know, you want the person who's best at it. You know, I'm not going to pretend to be a carpenter and, you know,
Yeah.
that door.
Right. No, exactly. And that actually, you mentioned earlier in my bio that was Cleveland Marketing Group. My whole theory there was I'm not super good at everything. However, I know a lot of people. So tell me about your project. I'll connect you with the right people.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I'm happy to have grown out of that. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be the guy who knew a guy. Like, you know, the guy that somehow we all know. Like there's that guy in all of our lives where people are like, what does he do for work? And you're like, I don't really know, but he always knows the right guy and somehow like drives a nice car. Or like, you know, like I wanted to be that guy growing up. And that was the whole premise with Cleveland Marketing Group. And
Ah.
as I grew up, I realized that that's it's hard to maintain. But
You have to be a super networker.
Yeah.
right. As it turns out, especially I think COVID taught me that I don't like people that much to always know the right guy. I love people and I love talking, and like I'll start up a conversation with anybody, but it takes a lot to manage a network like that. So you always know the right guy. And more importantly, I think that the guy that you're willing to recommend.
Yeah.
So as this is off topic, but I'll keep talking.
No, it's all good.
Alright.
Yeah. Yeah.
As we grew Gapsto in the e-commerce world, there's a lot of referral programs and affiliate programs and stuff like that. So we had a
Yeah.
lot of partners. And by partners, I mean, we met with them one time. We signed up for a referral program. They'll give us 10% if we happen to sell one of our clients, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
And I realized as we built out our partners page that there was a bunch of them that I would never use on my own site. So then a couple of years back, we went through and we didn't actually cancel the agreements. We took them off the site. We notified a few of them, hey, you know, we're no longer want to be affiliated with you.
Yeah.
And basically now our partners we have like 9 of them
Yeah.
from like 45. And
Oh.
those 9, I will very confidently refer to people out and have no qualms or issues or any sort of doubt that they'll take care of my people.
Yeah. I think that's such a big thing in business, right? Like,
Yeah, who you
I
know.
mean, everyone knows everyone. Like,
Yep.
even that there was like a guy you introduced us to last week for like, it was
HubSpot.
yeah, HubSpot stuff.
Mhm.
And we had like an awesome conversation with him. And it's like turns out he knew like all these other people we knew in the food industry. He's like, this is like a little family. Like everyone knows everyone here. And yeah, I don't know. I think it does matter, like, you
Yeah.
know, vetting people as well. Like if you're considering working with anyone, consider like the other people that they've worked with and the referral source, you know.
For sure.
That really is a huge thing. So
For sure.
awesome. What a fun conversation,
thank you.
Sean. Thank you so much for being
glad
part
we
of our
did
little
it.
5 mistakes series.
I'm glad we did it.
Yeah.
I have lots of mistakes in my life. So anything that other people can learn from, I'm happy to share.
Likewise, right? Like we all are entrepreneurs. We all learn every day, right? So it's always
For
good.
sure.
So awesome. Well, thanks again, Sean. It was so awesome chatting with you.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it, Sean.